he's played lacrosse.
I haven't gotten into lacrosse yet, but no doubt that'll come. A couple of our neighbours are into that. But
It's a great game.
Yeah. Well, I grew up playing soccer, so I play out in the street with them at the weekends, playing street soccer. So
that's the game of the world.
That's the way I grew up playing. It's not the way it's played here, which is, everybody's in their gear and they're in cleats on grass. That's not how. Until people in the United States understand that's not how you learn how to play soccer. The United States will never have the best soccer team in the world. They could have if they just got away from this. Everybody here seems to think everything has to be so organized. That's not how soccer's played in the rest of the world. Right. Literally, guys play it on the street, and they learn their skills on the street. So,
sure. I mean, footwork is footwork. You can do that anywhere.
Yeah, right? But it's funny. I think that the way it's so coached here and so organized that I don't think I think the coaching actually takes away the flair. Sounds strange, but I think that's what actually happens.
I could see that.
Everything is just regimented, but that's not how you grow up playing soccer. Well, that's not how the great soccer players ever learned to play soccer. Not one of them.
That's when you play or do an activity by the rules from the beginning, it leads to no creativity.
Correct. That's correct. Bit like business.
Yeah, it is. You take some kids and put them in a yard and throw a ball at them, and before you know it, they figured out a game to play with that ball. Yeah,
and that's the way I sort of go out when I go out and play with them on the street. I'm sort of trying to go back to my youth, the way I grew up playing it.
Yeah, and where did you grow up?
Ireland.
In Ireland, which part?
I actually was born in the northern part, and I was only there for like 5-6 years, and then my parents moved 6 miles south of the border into the Republic of Ireland, and I grew up the rest of my life there. But I was on the border, and most of my relatives all lived north of the border, so I was crossing that border every day for most of my life.
Oh wow! Okay.
Right through the Troubles, so I saw the whole thing.
That had to be wild.
Yeah, when you look back at it now, it's hard to even imagine that it was going on, and life went on as normal, and you just knew every day there was going to be bombs going off in certain parts of the counties, and life just went on.
Well, look, we live in Chicago, so
that's also true. I mean, from my perspective, it's still hard for me to understand the whole gun love over here. So I grew up with the opposite of that, which was, because of the Troubles and stuff, nobody wanted guns, and our police didn't even carry guns. The police in the Republic of Ireland didn't carry guns. So, this obsession with guns over here is a bit hard for me to understand.
Well, when the country was established, it was the Wild West. I mean, it was wild out here.
Yeah.
We were established as a violent country from the beginning, and it was written into the Constitution.
Yeah, I know it's written in the Constitution, all right, but I've read that Second Amendment probably 10,000 times at this stage, and I still can't understand how the Supreme Court takes the interpretation of the Second Amendment that it takes. Because when I read it, it says a well-armed militia, and that seems to me that it's an organized group, not that it's individuals. That's how I read it, and I can't see that. I mean, a militia is not an individual. Well, and it says well organized, I think is the terminology that you use. So I just don't get that. I don't think the founding fathers meant it to mean that an individual could go around with a fully automatic weapon.
No. Yeah. Of course not. But what the founding fathers were very distrustful of each other, and obviously of a centralized government.
Yeah, that's right. But that's what it was about. It was to make sure that the British in particular, the government didn't didn't treat them as second-class citizens the way they had been treated prior to that. But it wasn't about individual rights, I don't believe. I think it was about protecting the country as a whole. But we have the best armed military in the world. We have a police force. Why do individuals need to be going around armed to the teeth?
Well, one way to look at it, though, I agree with all of that, is what happens when the police force goes rogue.
Yeah. What if? I mean, come on. I mean, what if you get hit by a car crossing the street? What if the plane goes down? You know, what if?
Yeah.
It hasn't happened. I mean, think about any Western democracy. I mean, it hasn't happened.
I do know I've been into some countries, that aren't so more third world.
Yeah, and, third world.
The police, whoever has the strongest weapon, generally has the most corruption in their favor.
Correct. Correct. But that's third world. We're not talking. You're not putting the United States in that category.
No, but we started out third world for sure.
Yeah, but we're not now.
We're not now. So, and you know what? You're right. So what they need to do is amend the Constitution. But
yeah, that's what I don't understand the people, because I don't believe that. Actually, I think all the opinion polls said that the vast majority of Americans, or over 50% of Americans, don't agree with people basically being able to get themselves armed to the teeth with very little control. I mean, you have to get a driver's license to drive a bloody car.
Right. Yeah, I think that's. I agree. Being licensed and trained to use a weapon is
a basic minimum. Yeah, I don't see how anybody. Like, that's not restricting anybody. That's just saying you should learn how to use it.
For sure. Well, hey, we've successfully gotten over noon, and we have some people coming in. Welcome to the SmartMarket call, the Materials Exchange SmartMarket call. It is Friday. What is it? June 24th already. My gosh, I was out with some friends last night, and we were talking about 4th of July. Starts basically next weekend. The summer is moving right along. I am excited to have with us today Gerry McCaughey from Entekra. Welcome, Gerry.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, actually, I should say I'm from Offsite Tech now. I'm still a board member and founder of Entekra, but my company that I'm representing now is Offsite Tech, which is basically a consultancy in the offsite construction space.
Oh, well, thank you for bringing that up. That's excellent. And that's the topic today is offsite construction. And first off, and we're going to figure out what the heck it is and, where you came from. And then we're going to have a good discussion about what's going on today and where we're headed. So first off, how did you get into this world of construction? Especially, you seem to talk funny. It doesn't sound like you may have grown up in California.
Yeah, well, today I'm speaking even more funny because I'm a little bit hoarse, so that's just not my deep, sexy, normal voice.
Of course,
but hopefully it sounds good today on streaming. No, I didn't. I grew up on the other side of the world in Ireland, and that's where my connection with offsite construction started. In fact, I was just thinking, I think I wrote my first paper on offsite construction 42 years ago.
Wow.
Right. So when people think about offsite construction here in the US, they sort of think about it being something that's relatively new. It's not to me, certainly, but it's not also new in Europe either. But in the case of my family, it actually goes back 60 years because how I got into it was because of my dad. My dad he passed away 2 years ago, but he really was, I'm going to say, probably Mr. Offsite in Europe. He emigrated to the United States from Ireland. He was a carpenter by trade. But primarily, what he did was he was at two ends of the spectrum. He was a roofer and he was a finish carpenter. But back in those days, homes were built out of concrete blocks in Ireland, primarily out of concrete blocks. They weren't wood framed. Okay. He emigrated to the United States and went to New York and discovered wood framing, homes literally being built out, the walls being built out of 2x4s and 2x6s.
Sure, of course.
And as a carpenter, that appealed to him. And when he got married to my mum out here in New York, she's Irish as well, and he emigrated back. And when he went back to Ireland, he thought this idea of building homes out of wood is a great idea. And even though he had learned stick framing on a job site in New York, it never crossed his mind. And again, I think this is the difference in the European mentality. It never crossed his mind to actually start stick framing on a job site. Now, maybe it was weather related, but it never crossed his mind. And he set up a small little business in Ireland, basically making wall panels and roof trusses with gusseted plywood gussets.
Sure, right.
And he would go out at the weekend with his brothers and his friends, and they would actually stand these houses for people. And that became effectively the first offsite business in Ireland, and basically the start of the wood framing industry in Ireland. And then that business went on to become very successful. And that's when by 1985, there'd been other people that entered the market, but by 1985, it was the largest offsite company in Britain and Ireland. And when I was in college, I did a business degree, and I had to write about something, and I picked the offsite industry. So that's how I did it 42 years ago. I wrote about the offsite industry.
Okay.
And not because I particularly knew anything about it or liked it or anything, just because my dad was in that industry, and I had to write a paper for my business degree. But I became intrigued very much, because the more I started doing the research into it, the more I started thinking to myself, at that point in time, it was still a very minor part of overall construction in Britain and Ireland, and I became intrigued as to why it wasn't more, and that sort of sparked my whole interest in it. And now I'm 59 years of age, and I'm still in it, and I'm still intrigued. Although it has moved on a lot since then, but that's how I initially got into it, was because my family has been. So you can say so if you think about it now, my dad started the first one, which was called IJM, which is now called IJM Timber Engineering. Then we started, myself and my dad and my brother and another gentleman, started Century Homes in Ireland, which actually went on to become the largest offsite provider in Europe.
Okay.
In 1990, and then I started in Tekra in California. So my family's been involved in 3 iterations of offsite construction. I'm proud to say all 3 businesses are all still in existence, are all still doing well.
Oh my gosh, fantastic.
And I say that, Michael, more because one of the questions that maybe people come up with is, well, you can't invest in all this automation, go through the boom and bust cycle of the construction industry. Well, like I said, in my case, in the case of my family, we're living proof that that's not true. We've been through 60 years of it, and all businesses are still there. It's not that you can't do it, is you have to understand the business that you're in and understand the business model that you're doing. That's where it fails. It's not the fact that you're investing in automation. It's the fact that most of the people who are doing it don't understand the industry that they're in.
Which, yeah, if you don't really understand all of the challenges and opportunities, you're going to get blindsided. So, there's a lot of terms that get thrown around. And I think what's super important about industries when you have conversations is defining what each term means. So, let's do that. When we were preparing for the call, I threw out, offsite, and gave an example. And you said, well, that's not really offsite construction. So why don't you, tell us what your belief, what you think I think you said yesterday, an offsite solution. What is that, and what is it not?
Right. I mean, I think this is a great starting point. And I think it also goes back to the question you always get, that I've had to answer myself, and that gets asked by Americans to me and by Europeans to me, is like, why is offsite construction not more prevalent in the United States? And it actually comes, part of the answer comes back to this particular point, is that there is a complete misunderstanding. And as we sit here today on June 24th, there is still a complete misunderstanding as to what offsite construction is. And where it comes down, before I even get into it, if I had $10 for every time that some guy in the construction industry in the United States, after talking to me, will turn around to me and say, oh, I've used panels before. And I really want to turn around to him and say, what the hell has that got to do with anything that I'm doing? But that's the problem. That's the starting problem, is that people think that offsite construction is just about panels. And that primarily comes from the component industry. And that's where the real problem starts. And I know this is going to pee off a lot of people watching this, but the component industry and the offsite industry are diametrically opposed. They come at it from completely different philosophies.
And it's hard to believe because they seem so similar.
That's correct. And the reason they seem so similar is because people are focusing on the end of it, not the start of it. So it's a bit like saying that if you want to say that, let's just take a rocket and a car are the same industry, because they both provide some form of transport. But they're obviously completely different. And the same thing is true of component manufacturers and offsite companies. What you end up with, which is something that goes into a building, but the whole process behind it and the whole motivation behind it and the whole principle behind it are completely different.
Okay.
And so what has happened, I mean, over the years that I've looked at this, what has happened is you've had people who have used wall panels. And the problem there is that in many cases, the builder or the customer of the wall panels didn't get the benefit that they thought they were going to get. And as a result of not getting that benefit, they then blame, when they hear the term offsite construction, they go, well, it doesn't work because I've used panels before. The reason why it didn't work is because you were using components. And to put that in another way is, and you're right, what I said yesterday was, if it's not a system, then it's not an offsite solution. That's one of the primary differentials. Offsite is a system. It's about the whole building. By definition, components are about a component, an element, a part of something. They are not about the totality of it. It's a bit like going in and buying the engine for your car, but nothing else to do with the car. You've bought a component, an element, but you haven't bought the car.
Correct.
Right? And that's the difference between a component manufacturer and an offsite company. And you'll see that, in my case, I detest the word component because I know it creates the wrong impression. It's not about the component. For an offsite company, typically, I would say 80% of the value that we bring to a customer occurs before a stick is cut or a nail is fired to produce a component. Think about that. 80% of the value is created.
Okay, so what does that mean? What is that 80%? What is the solution part?
Right. Good question. Because if you look at, and I'll give you a few examples of this. If you look at the U.S. residential construction, and I think, to be fair, a lot of us will agree this. It's extremely dysfunctional and inefficient, and a very elongated process, an unnecessarily elongated. With pretty much, the analogy I use, it's like a relay race. Nobody starts their bit until the last guy has finished their bit.
Right.
And then you get the point of, oh, that's not my fault, that was his fault. Right. And then the debate starts as, well, whose fault was it? And all this time gets lost in the mix trying to figure out, well, who's responsible for doing that and who's not. And we know this happens every single day. Who
impacted who?
Correct. And we know it happens every single day. Every single day this happens. And you're down to then, I think Autodesk or Procore, I think, came out with a report that said something along the lines that nearly 2 days in every 5 on a job site is wasted time by people with inaccurate information trying to figure out how to do things because there wasn't provided with the correct materials or the correct information, or the drawings were wrong, and they're trying to figure out how to do it. And then somebody tries to interpret on a job site, but time gets lost and wasted and costs get incurred.
Sure.
But what happens with an offsite company is we're basically focusing on all of that stuff long before you ever get to the job site. I mean, that's the basic principle, is to take that time. Because if you think about the process of building a home, or building any building, how many months beforehand does that start before anybody ever starts on the job site?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's months. It's literally months, if not years. That's all valuable time that could be utilized to figure out the problems that doesn't impact on the critical path. But that's not how it's done in the United States. Really, nobody does anything serious about trying to find out the information until literally days or hours before they're about to go on the job site. And then the head scratching starts.
Right. You start, you design a building and then you figure out, okay, it's probably going to cost this. And then, at some point you let the contract go and you hire your plumber, right? And the plumber says, well, when am I supposed to start? And you give him a date in the future and he shows up that date. Where are the plans? And he starts, putting his pipes together.
But that's what I mean about dysfunctional, elongated, and inefficient. Though that's exactly, everybody knows this, Michael. Like you've just articulated it perfectly. Everybody knows this is what goes on, and yet nobody does anything about it. Whereas what happens with an offsite company, the first thing we're going to do is pull all that information together. Now we're not doing it after the fact. We're doing it in that dead time that's before anything goes on site. So we are not slowing down the process. We are actually taking the time that already exists prior to going on site and saying, guys, let's figure out this now. Let's figure this out before we go on that job site. And that really starts with the 3D model of the building, or the digital twin. And this is the key. And this in the 21st century, this is just common sense. We're going to produce a full 3D working model, digital twin of that building. So we're going to have that building built before it's ever built. But everybody understands it's a hell of a lot cheaper to figure out a problem on a computer screen than it is when you're standing on a job site.
Absolutely.
Right. So that's what offsite does. Component people don't do that. Offsite, we start with the whole building, a holistic view of the whole building. Not only are we just looking at the whole building, but we're looking at all of the trades and the other people who impact on that building. So if you touch,
let me stop you for just a second, because I know that there's someone, including myself, when I first hear that, I'm like, well, that sounds expensive. And so much of the expense going into a project is the planning, right? And it's spent before you even drive your first nail, right? So I know the answer that you'll say is you save it on the back end, right? But what is someone who says, why should I spend all this money on the technology to do the 3D modeling? What am I going to get out of that?
Very simply, you're going to get a better building, and you're going to make more profit, which is why you exist. That's what you're going to get. You're literally going to make more profit. No question about it. It doesn't matter where you save the money in the process, whether you save it at the front or you save it at the back end. Money saved is money saved.
When you say you, who's going to make more profit? Is it the building owner? Is it the trades? Like, is everyone in on this?
Well, yes, it's a combination. I mean, primarily the objective of an offsite company, this again is a distinction here. Primarily the focus of the offsite company is to ensure that the builder makes more money. That's our customer is the builder. Our customer is not the framer. Very clear. That's another major distinction between a component company and an offsite company. Our customer is the builder. Now think about this. The builder, it's the builder's land, it's the builder's site, it's the builder's drawings, it's the builder's bank loan, it's the builder's customer, and it's the builder's risk. Right? And I think that gets lost in the whole equation of this discussion. The single most important person here is that builder. They've taken the risk. Our objective is to make them more money. That's our objective. They are absolutely top of the tree. We focus on them. Let's see, because they're the guy that's going to decide the next time whether or not we're the people called to do that job. Right? They employ the framer. The framer doesn't employ the builder. So they're the ones who have the power and the right to make the decisions as to who's used on their job site. So our focus is with the builder. That is the offsite company's focus, is with the builder. Because if I can make that builder more money, then he's coming back to me the next job. He may then say to the framer, Michael, well, if you don't want to use an offsite solution, fair enough, go away. I'll get somebody who will. But I'm using an offsite solution because I know it makes me more money.
So the inside of an offsite solution, you're still using a framer, though, in many cases.
That's correct. That is correct. And that's why this is where the disruption is now taking place, because what you have is the misunderstanding from the framers about, they think that we're a threat to them, whereas in actual fact we're not. In fact, some of the framers we're using will openly admit that they make more money working on an offsite solution than they do stick framing it, and they have far less risk and far less hassle, and they can do more work. But you'll have the old guard who don't even want to listen. They just don't want to listen. Like there are a group of people out there who are still in the view of no. I do it the way I do it. That's it. They don't even want to listen to the discussion.
I'm familiar with those people. Yeah.
Yes. No, I know you are, and everybody in the construction industry is. But there are some open-minded framers out there who are changing the way they look at things, and they're going, no. We see this as the future. We see that our customers are asking for this now. We really need to get ahead of this. And so that's natural in every industry. When you get disruption coming in, you'll have the innovators, the 2.25%, who will be willing to change. And that's what you're seeing now, is that initial group of more open-minded framers who are saying, yeah, I know this is the future. We're not, by the way, saying to them, you can't stick frame on other jobs. That's the whole beauty of it. They can still go and stick frame the other jobs. So they're not losing anything. It's actually giving them incremental business in many ways. They've now got a foot in both markets.
Sure.
And so there is no threat, but it's the lack of business acumen on a lot of their parts that they don't fully understand it, and they just see it as a threat and don't even examine it to understand how they can use it to make more money. That's the biggest problem with some of them.
All right, so you get very involved at the beginning with the design in this 3D model computer program, and you tease out all the issues, and then when it's time to hit go.
No, but I want to go back. Yeah, no, we're missing a part here. So what I was going to say to you earlier on is, when we produce this 3D model, we're not just looking at the building for the sake of the building from our perspective. We are looking at the building from the perspective of anybody who connects to or touches off that building. Can we make their job easier? Right? Okay. Right. Because again, this is the distinction between a component company and an offsite company. We are not just focused on us. We're focused on everybody else who's working on that building. So to the extent that we're sitting down with the plumber, the electrician, the HVAC, concrete, structural engineer, the architect, we're working with all of them with the sole purpose of making their job easier.
And you're working with them, not standing in the mud on a job site. This is in the office ahead of time.
That is correct. And I can give you multiple examples, Mike. I mean, I think I have to be careful to make sure I don't give too much information where people pick out the jobs. But I'll give you a few. So we were brought in on a job that I sold. We were brought in on a 4-story multifamily project in Northern California. And the building had a colossal amount of structural steel on the first floor. Okay. That was, to us, from our perspective, nonsensical, literally nonsensical. And we're looking at this, but we were building the building. We were building our frame around it to incorporate it. But the scheduling of it, even because the builder was responsible for the structural steel, even getting it done and getting it done correctly was just a massive problem and was costing him a fortune. So we went and said, okay, let's run that through our engineer. So we had our own engineer in house. So we ran it through our engineer. We could take every single piece of structural steel out of that building. Every single piece. Saving, I think it was close on $50,000 of structural steel that was in the building. Now think about that. We did that because we were trying to help the builder in terms of, we knew it was causing him a lot of hassle. But when we went back to the builder and said, you can take that steel out, he said, we thought we could, but we didn't know if we could, but thank you very much. But he said, we're pretty much stuck now, because if we go back and tell the engineer we can take that steel out, he's going to cause us trouble through the rest of the job. Now, that's the actual discussion that took place, but that engineer is never going to get used by that builder again. Right? Because we actually gave him a full set of calcs showing there it is, it doesn't need the steel. So the steel was in it for no, and again, this is part of the dysfunctional nature of U.S. residential construction, that they go out, particularly in markets where you have to have an engineer of record. So the engineer of record is involved, and they say this is what you have to do. But whoever vets the engineer of records theory on behalf of the builder? Nobody does.
No, they just have the certificate that says I'm an engineer and I can stamp this.
Correct. But there's where an offsite company steps in. We have our own engineers.
Yep.
So we step in and we go, hold on, we're going to vet this. We're now going to have the argument or the discussion with the engineer of record to say, we don't think that's correct. And so rather than having, because you know what happens even in these jobs is you go to an engineer of record with a building, they give it off to the guy who's got 2 years experience in the corner and who takes out a prescriptive code and starts, this is the size you put into, without even calculating what the load is coming. It just goes prescriptive. And if you value engineered, you can find out you can take out an awful lot of it.
I think value engineering is something that is probably overlooked, much too often.
Well, that's what I mean about what we're doing. We are doing, but I mean real value engineering. We're not doing what happens is you'll get stick framers who come out and say, oh, we value engineering, and when they look at the minor parts of it, we're looking at the whole building. I mean, we are literally engineering that whole building. We have the ability with our computers to run all the calcs, to run all the stresses on the building. Like we can test anything. and we can go back and have a legitimate argument over whether or not something is correct. It's not a hypothetical, oh, finger in the air. It's no, here's the actual stress on that beam.
Do you think building codes potentially hold back some of this?
No, I don't think it's the building code. Honestly, I don't think it's the building code. I think it's the process. I think it's the way the system has been set up. Because if you think about how buildings are built, I mean, you know, the frame goes out to get bid, and in many cases, it's a guy in a pickup with 5 guys that arrive on that job site to do it, and so they just take whatever the engineer has given them and away they go with it, because there isn't a full vetting. They're focused on just getting that part, getting that building. I keep going back to say we're focused on improving the efficiency of the building for the customer, and that looks at everything. So it's not the code itself, it's the process. And I keep going back to this, it's a disjointed, elongated process with nobody doing their bit. And so once the engineer's finished his bit, it gets handed over, the guy takes it and goes to the next bit. But nobody goes back and says, hold on a minute, let me take that, and then give it a good examination to see is it actually correct. That's what an offsite company will do. Component companies don't do that. They're looking at, maybe there's a post in the beam and we'll move that there. But we're looking at that whole building. And we're sitting down with the engineer, the architect. We're sitting down with the plumber. We're looking to try and figure out now. You've got pipes coming up here. We don't care where you want. We don't care. We're not telling you where to put them. What we're saying to you is, tell us where you want to put them, and we'll make sure you don't have a blockage in that area. So we make sure when you get to that job site that what you wanted to do, you can do. And the beauty of that then follows on to consistency of framing. So if you're on single family and you're doing 100 of the same houses, every single one of those houses will be framed exactly the same way. So when the guy comes out, there's muscle memory now. They know exactly where to go. There won't be the problem. The problem didn't occur in the first one. It will not occur in the second one.
Of course not.
That's not the same when it comes to stick framing, because you get 2 different framing crews and they frame a house a different way.
Right.
We bring consistency, but there's another additional part to that, which is the predictability of the scheduling. So one of the things that the trades dislike, and we've had a lot of interviews with the trades, one of the things that the trades detest the most is the fact that they're told that the house or the building will be ready next Thursday, and they get their crews ready to go out, turn up next Thursday, and the building's not ready. Now what do? They have to try to find work for those guys. If they can't find work for those guys, they've just lost that money.
Yeah.
That's just a waste of their time. The beauty about an offsite company is if our truck pulls up on Monday morning, you know exactly what stage that house is going to be at on Monday afternoon.
Correct.
Right. So the trades can get themselves scheduled much more efficiently and make more money, which is why in the case of one of our builder customers, they actually went to their own board, their national board, and said to them, we get the trades first in our locality because they love working on the offsite system because they make more money. Right. But they make more money because it's predictable. Their trades are not missing those days. Every time that truck pulls up and that crane is there, that house is going to be at plate level that afternoon. So they know that by Wednesday or Thursday, that house is going to be ready for them to be in it. And that brings more money to the trade. So now you're the most attractive girl in the bar. You're the most attractive building job site. So the trades want to go to you. So this is another thing that comes up now. People say, oh, well, there's no point building so fast because we can't get the trades to do it. No. It doesn't work that way. You build them fast and build them predictable. The trades are going to want to come to you. They're not going to the other guy down the road who keeps putting them off or missing a day here, and then they're losing money. Because that's what I think people don't understand is if you don't have that frame ready and the plumber can't get in or the electrician can't get in or the HVAC guy can't get in, he's losing money. You just affected his ability to make money.
I think there's a theme here that I just keep hearing, and it's organization.
Yes.
It's
process improvement.
You've hinted to this before. We live in the 21st century here. Like the technology that is at our hands, it should be used. Like we see it with our business as well. People are buying and selling lumber like they did in the 1970s still, when there's ways to do this using technology, using organization, using some sophisticated processes. The challenge always is when that that whole process involves several people or several entities over time, making sure every step of the way is connected in a digital manner. Because if you don't, now you've broken the chain a little bit.
Correct. I mean,
And
the technology, this is the thing is, I mean, some people have said, I was at PCBC yesterday, and somebody said, I mean, construction is like 200 years of history unimpeded by innovation. It's been unimpeded by it, because that's the way we've always done it. Which like, as much as it's a joke in one sense, think about how ridiculous that is.
Yeah.
We're now in 2022, and we still got people. I mean, I'll give you an example. We brought an American builder over to the UK to meet one of the largest national home builders, production home builders in the UK. And we were at dinner one night. I tell the story many times, as people listening haven't heard it before, but we were at dinner one night on the oldest restaurant on the River Thames. And it was the director of construction and the head of the US construction company. And very pleasant dinner. We'd been out to a job site. We'd seen some multifamily stories being erected, buildings being erected, and the American builder said to the UK guy, "So why don't you stick frame?" And the UK director of operations said, "Sorry, excuse me, what do you mean?" "No, but why don't you stick frame?" And he said, "No, well, I heard you. I just don't know what do you mean?" He said, "Like, have the lumber delivered to the site and have the guys cut it up and frame it there." And he looked at him like in astonishment, like literally in astonishment. And his answer back to him was, "Why on earth would I do that?" Literally couldn't understand the idea, the concept that you would have lumber delivered out to a job site and have a guy with a skill saw. So basically, total abdication of all of the technology of the 21st century. Just basically saying, I'm not going to use it. I am going to take a skill saw and start cutting it up, leaning stuff over my boot and chopping it up. So you talk about, I mean, there's been more and more research done that shows that approximately 20 to 25% of the lumber on a job site is waste. It's not hard to believe that that's what happens when you're not using the technology that exists. So it's very hard for me and very hard for most Europeans to understand, why is it we use automation and technology in every other thing that we use? Like use
every day.
Every day. I mean, I use this example of, can you imagine if you went out this afternoon to go down to whatever car dealer you want to go to, whether you're going back down to buy your Ford F-150 or a BMW or whatever it is, and you went to the dealer and said, "Listen, I'd like to buy that vehicle." And the dealer said to you, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you two options. Option one is I'll have all of the parts shipped to your front yard, and I'll have 5 guys come in a pickup truck with some pneumatic tools and welding gear and put it together, or I can have it built in the factory." Who's going to opt to have it built in the front yard?
Yeah.
No. Or you go to Apple and you go for your iPhone and you ask the same question. The guy says, "Well, yeah, I'll have the local guy come out with some soldering gear and we'll assemble it in your front room." You wouldn't do it. Or your TV. Nor would you do it for any product that you own. You wouldn't do it for anything. Yet, people think in the United States that makes sense for doing it for the home, the most expensive thing they'll ever own. That you basically say, no, 21st century technology has no benefit in the construction of my home. Now, think about how ridiculous that is when you think about the technology to make a wall panel in a factory, which actually can make walls 12 meters long, 37.5 feet long, plus or minus 2 millimeters, the width of your nail. That's the level of accuracy that can produce. And you think about then, why do buildings get hairline cracks at headers or on the outside? Because the building settles, because the timber that's being used and the joint wasn't tight, because they were cutting it over the toe of their boot.
Right.
I mean, those are the things so when you look at the total cost involved, you have to look at all, not just the bid price, because if you only focus on the bid price, you'll never know the total cost.
Yeah. Well, that's the bidding process has done more damage to the construction industry than saving money. That's for sure.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's shift gears a little bit and look forward. So, we definitely, establish what it means for offsite solutions, but where do we go from here? Like what happens in the next 5-10 years? What do you see?
Well, I mean, people would say that I would say this, but I mean, I've been through a couple of cycles of this on the other side of the world. there's no doubt in my mind that offsite construction, and I mean real offsite, I don't mean components. I mean, the component industry, if you're going to focus as a component company, you're really never going to get anywhere in the long run. You may get a positive blip for a while, but that's not going to be what's going to be the long-term change in the industry. It's going to be that more and more true offsite companies are going to enter the industry. And whether they're from Europe or from Japan, there's probably going to be a lot on coming from the outside to do it, because they're the ones who are used to doing it. Because like pretty much component companies don't really exist in Europe, and they don't really exist in Japan. It's all about the whole house, the system. Because to use that famous expression from Aristotle, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So 3,000 years ago, Aristotle figured out there's a benefit from synergy of bringing it all together. But the US construction industry has gone the exact opposite way, which is basically, think about it, they slice and dice everything down to the bare minimum, and then they try and get the cheapest price for that particular element.
Correct.
And then the buyer says, well, I've got the cheapest price for this widget, this widget, this widget, this widget, this widget. And nobody ever talks to the operations guy and say, well, how much is it going to cost on site to put all these widgets together? So if you think about a car, so you have to think about, you have the option to buy a car, but instead of going out and paying the one price for the car, you went out and you said, I want the price for the tires, I want the price for the wheels, I want the price for the steering wheel, I want the price for the seats, I want the price for the spark plugs. And you end up, and I said, but I've got the cheapest price for every single one of those individual things. And then you add them all together. You think you're going to have a cheaper price than buying the whole car?
No,
you're not. No. That actually is the same thing that's happening in housing. But they've got this mentality that they think that, no, I get the cheapest thing for this, but nobody looks at it holistically. And the amount of operations guys and directors of operations that I've spoken to in national home builders who are completely annoyed and frustrated at the fact they don't get considered when the bid is going out for the framing package, right? Because they truly know the benefit on the job site. They know what it's going to do on the job site. But the person putting the job out to bid doesn't know and doesn't care and is not incentivized to care. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They're incentivized to buy the widget at a half a cent cheaper than they bought the widget last year. But they're not incentivized to look at the totality of the project and see, how can I save overall of this build?
It comes down to sharing of data. If you share the data across many different component or parts of a business, then you can get the totality. But if you don't share data.
Yeah, well, the other thing that comes down to it is they don't understand the cost of cycle time. So what you'll have is, I mean, you go and ask a builder how much is the everyday on site costing you. They can't calculate it, or if they do, they come up with a bizarre number because they actually don't know how to calculate it. I mean, sure. If you look at the total cycle time, go and look at the overheads that you have on that job for that particular length of time, and divide that by the number of days you're going to be on site, and now you'll start to figure out what your true costs are for every day on site. But what they typically only do is look and say, oh, the cost of interest carry on this is this. That's not your cycle time cost. Your cycle time cost is made up of far more things than that. But they're not. No buyer, and I've said this in all the ones that I've spoken to. No buyer I've spoken to so far, with the exception of 2 privately held companies, actually knew what the true cycle time cost on site was, which is shocking to me.
It's, I'm sure it's a little difficult to measure, and maybe they didn't want to know the answer. Unfortunately,
I think that's a part of it. That's definitely a part of it.
All right. So we've definitely, this is a big topic. We've covered, about 40 minutes of it. I think that, I look around the rest of the world, and here's a comment, Philip Riley, that stick frame on site is extremely rare in Australia. 90% of the homes are off-site. It can't be wrong if the rest of the world is doing it. So,
well, I'd say that I put it another way. I even put it another way. Is you don't even look overseas. Look here. So why does a builder who just say I have sold him an offsite solution, why does he come back and buy the second job and the third job and the fourth job? Remember, he's been building stick framing for 20, 30, 40 years, and I get him to, my hardest job is getting to buy the first one. Why does he come back from the second and third one? Does he come back to the second and third one because he thinks he's losing money? No, he doesn't. And I'm going to give you a real live example, Michael. So I was involved in a project that involved 270 units, multifamily.
Okay.
And we bid the project in Northern California, and the builder, the developer, said, listen, I love the idea, I love the concept, I love the technology. He said, but I don't know you. I've never used you. I've used this framer for the last 20 years. And I don't know you, but I love everything about what you're doing and what you're saying. But as I look at it at the moment, is you're slightly more expensive than he is. And I don't know whether or not you can deliver it or not, but I would love to use you. And so we said to him, tell you what, we're reasonable people here. Let's try and work this out. How long is it going to take you to frame that stick framing? And he said, it's probably going to take about 46 to 47 weeks to get it all done. And we said, we believe we can do it in 14 weeks. And he said, that's, incredible. But we said, well, tell you what, what's that delta worth to you?
Right.
How does that translate into actual money? And he said, that's a good question. Let me go off and I'll check. And he went off. And he came back and he said, from we can calculate between getting extra revenue from heads on beds because this was rental property, from getting the construction loan converted to a permanent loan, from the lack of waste on site. He said he came up with a figure of $600,000. $600,000 was the delta. And so we said to him, if we do this in 14 weeks, would you be willing to split the $600,000? So you take the $300,000 benefit and we take the $300,000 benefit, which means we were getting paid more for it than we had originally bid it. But he didn't want to give it to us because we were slightly more expensive than the stick framer. But we said, okay, if you can save $600,000, will you give us the $300,000 bonus for doing it? And he said, yes. And he did.
That's amazing. Nice.
Right? So we are now on the second phase of that, which is 170 units. And we didn't have to competitively bid it.
Of course.
Right. So those are the reality of the situation. So all of these people said, oh, it's more expensive. The only people you hear saying it's more expensive are the stick framers, because you get this ridiculous situation where a stick framer will go to a builder and the builder says, I want you to use an offsite solution. And the framer will give a price to erect the offsite solution that costs more than stick framing it. So you know what he's doing. He's just completely shafting everybody.
Sure.
But when you see the builders who actually get it, they don't want to go back. Like, they don't want to go back. They see the benefits on their job sites.
Well, and in the environment that we live in, with the labor where it's at and material costs where it's at, you have to be as efficient as possible. You may spend a little more utilizing a process like this, but like you pointed out, you got to look at the big picture.
It's the big picture. It's everybody else in every business looks at the big picture. I mean, if you think about anybody that makes anything, and you go to buy a piece of equipment, I mean, you're looking at the benefit that the piece of equipment will bring to you, right? So you look at that piece of equipment versus this piece of equipment, but then you're asking, okay, what can this piece of equipment do for me, and what benefit will it bring? And you're factoring that into the equation of your cost. You're not just looking at the price of the two machines. You want to know the performance of the two machines before you make a decision. So when people go out here and they say, oh, stick framing versus offsite, and there's a delta in the framing price, but they don't consider the benefits, they don't know what they're looking at. So, I mean, and again, if I go back to if you think about it, I've been at this 40 plus years myself. In that period of time, I would say I've probably lost 2 customers that went back from offsite. In fact, I can actually name, there's a builder in Ireland called Tony Graham who used our system. And I can remember sitting down with him one day, and he said to me, Gerry, he said, I don't know. He said, at face value, it looks like to use your system is more expensive. He said, and I don't know how it is. He said, but I know that at the end of the year, I make more money using your system. This was actually, we were sitting down having Christmas dinner, actually. I took him out for Christmas drinks and Christmas lunch. And this is when this discussion, we said, I don't know where it is. He said, but I know I'm making more money. Because that's really him comparing the bid price against the total benefit. He knew that when the total benefit at the end of the day, he made more profit. And that's what it's all about. So if you only focus on the bid, you never understand what the profit potential is. And so that's probably the hardest job. But to go back to your point, Mike, where is it going over the next 10 years? You touched on probably the single most important point there, which is the whole issue of labor. And I mean, I put a post up this morning, again, it was on Construction Dive, about the fact that all the builders now are paying more for the labor and getting less productivity, which actually, this is a bit like stagflation in one sense in terms of construction.
Sure.
where you end up having to pay more to get less qualified people. So you end up paying more and getting less. So the problem gets worse. That's going to continue to happen. That is not going to go away, because you have this discussion that's going on in the US at the moment, and it sort of frustrates me immensely to hear them going on about it, because it's said with such certainty that the reason why we don't have more people in the trades in US construction is because we don't have trade schools. I mean, that's such a ridiculous argument. The reason why we don't have trade schools is because people don't want to go to them.
Right.
That's the point. So you can open all the trade schools that you want, and you may give an example, oh, we've got somebody to go into this thing. But the reason why the reason why trade schools disappeared is because people didn't want to go to them. Because if you go out, I think it was the NAHB did a couple of years ago, did a survey where they asked young Americans how much they would want to go and work on a US construction site. And the starting figure that I think that they came up with was $70,000. That's how much they just don't want to. They'll go and work on Amazon or in McDonald's before they'll go and work in construction. And the logic behind that I believe is, if you've grown up with, one of these in your hand and an iPad in the other hand, and everything about you is technology, everything from your car to your home involves technology, and you look, as I said earlier on, at an industry that's 200 years of history unimpeded by innovation, you look at it and you go, that bears no relevance to my life.
Correct. Absolutely.
And that's simply, I'm not going to go and work for an industry that doesn't want to modernize. I want to be using technology. And so you can talk about all the trade schools they want, but until you bring modern methods of construction to the industry, the young modern people are not going to want to work in it. I think can't get my head around why they don't understand it.
And it's like that you see it and there will be change. So why would I jump on this sinking ship? Right? Why would I even go into something that I know is not innovative?
That's correct. That's correct. But you're not going to. But it's even at the. I think it's even more so that they can't see the relevance of it. They literally can't see the relevance. I mean, why would I do that? I mean, if you think about the type of people that I've employed in offsite construction, like in Ireland, when I set up in Techro, we have set up with 50 engineers in an office in Ireland. Young people. These are all young people, and they love what they're doing, and they love the technology, and they're building these 3D models, and they're sending CNC files 6,000 miles around the world to drive automation, and they're excited about it. And then the guys who are out on site using our system, are on their iPads with their Deluxe system, and they're looking at it, and they can see the drawings, and they can actually put it up there in 3D and see the building going up, and they're going, yeah, this is modern technology. And the building's going up in hours instead of going up in weeks. That's how you get people attracted to it. But continuing on to do the things we've been doing for the last 40 years is not going to change the labor shortage. It's going to actually continue to exacerbate the labor shortage. And so if you even look around the world, for example, if you look to the UK, which faces similar issues with regard to housing that the United States faces, the British government got involved and actually put a construction guru onto it by the name of Farmer. And he produced a report called Modernize or Die, which basically said to the UK construction industry, if we don't switch to modern methods of construction, we're going nowhere. And we will not be able to deliver the homes at an affordable price to the citizens of our country. You don't have that discussion here with anybody at a higher level. What happens here is the discussion is all about, oh, you need to open up the immigration. You need to get more people to come across the border. You need to open up more trade schools. That's not the solution. The solution is to modernize. The solution is to modernize the industry.
That's a backward-looking solution for sure.
That's correct. We need to look forward. We need to use modern technology to improve. Take the other situation. Over the last 60 years, U.S. construction productivity, depending on which report you look at, is either non-existent or it's negative.
Right.
Over 60 years. That's a shocking statistic when you think agricultural productivity has increased by 175%. And U.S. construction productivity is actually either neutral or negative.
And they have benefited, much like agriculture, from new machines and larger scale of tools. All right, well, we need to wrap up here. We're at 50 minutes. Boy, when you get going, we can definitely feel the passion. I love it. And I see so many correlations between some of the maybe uphill battles that offsite solutions are going the same as a marketplace.
Yes.
Where
So you're doing exactly the same thing. You're bringing modern technologies, but there's also, I'll leave it off. I mean, there's a great quote, I think, by one of my favorite Irish authors, George Bernard Shaw, and he famously once said, and think about this, he said, "Nothing great was ever achieved by a reasonable man."
well,
Right? But the point of that is that in order to break the glass ceilings and in order to get through certain things, there has to be people like you and people like me, or people that actually pushes the boundary.
for
Because
sure.
if you don't, you never get incremental change. Because if everybody in every single industry just simply said that's the way we've always done it, we would never have had an improvement in anything.
Oh, you know what? I'd have to go get a bale of hay to feed my horse tonight.
That's correct. That is correct. Or, as I said to a lot of other builders, you wouldn't be going off the job site to get in your F-150 to go home. You'd be going out of your job site and getting on your horse to go home.
Yeah.
So that's what I don't understand. They want the most modern F-150s that they can get their hands on, get themselves to work and away from work, but they don't want to use any technology actually on the job site.
No, crazy. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, the new consulting firm you have is called
Offsite Tech.
Offsite Tech.
Tech. TEK is the tech. So offsitetech.com.
Excellent.
So if any of your listeners really want to understand about offsite construction, just look me up. You'll find me on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. We'll put that in the notes for the replays of this. Gerry, thank you so much. This was great. We really appreciate your insights, and it's hard to argue with the success of your companies. And I truly believe in this. I think it's the way to go.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. All right.